I'm Ken. Let's take a look at some stamps I got for Christmas. Today I have a kind of a new setup. So I'm filming this through my iPhone, streaming it into my Macintosh using QuickTime for those of you who care about such details. Today we're going to take a look at this composition book that I got for Christmas, which is a stamp collection that my mom sent me from her husband's father. So there's a lot of nice US stamps in here. We're going to take a look at those. We're also going to film this using my new microphone that my wife got me. So that should make the sound quality better for this video. And she also got me a nice new light. So hopefully with these additions, we'll have a nice change. Also, this is just so much fun to play around with infinite recursion going from my phone to my Mac, for those of you who like that kind of thing. Okay, let's get a look at this composition book that came from my mother's husband's father. Christmas gift to me this year. Inside of this is not a stamp album, but it does look like somebody really cared about collection in this. So let's take a look here. You can see they've hand labeled this United States, so really nicely cared for here. When we turn the pages, you can see sections labeled for various subsets of stamps, but no stamps in there. So that's an interesting thing. As I turn, you can see more labeled sections, all of which that don't have stamps in them. But you might notice some hinge remnants here, and here. So there were stamps at some point in this album. They're just not here anymore. And so that begs the question, what's going on with this album? So let's keep turning the page and see if we can't figure that out. Now we turn to the first full page of stamps in this album, and you can start to see a nice selection of stamps here. And you'll see a hinge remnant here. It's quite possible that this stamp went next to it, although that's kind of a strange thing to double up on. You see a really nice old issue here. We'll check that in a minute. You'll also see another pair of really nice issues. These are pretty nice issues as well. And a blank spot right here. So again, why was this picked out? It's possible that somebody came through this book already and picked out all the great stamps. But if that were the case, I'm kind of doubting that this particular stamp was considered one of the great ones. When they left this one sitting behind. That one is possibly unused. I'm going to have to look a little bit closer. If it's unused, that's quite a nice stamp. And why it would have been left in here unpicked if somebody were picking this album is a mystery. So let's turn the page and see if we get any more clues to what's going on here. Oh, sorry. Let's leave that in nicely. Again, all picked out for the commemoratives. The series of 1902, completely missing. Missing. You can see a fair number of stamps missing from the Columbian, the Louisiana Purchase missing, some higher value potential Columbians. That would be a really nice thing to pick out of this if that's what someone was doing. Same with the Trans-Mississippi issues, although I only see 2 hinge remnants on that one. Moving along, here we go. That stamp right there is a pretty nice stamp, that 2-cent stamp. And so it seems likely that if somebody were picking this out for value, they would have pulled that one out. So I'm kind of doubting that they were picking for those valuable stamps. Keeping moving. Very few stamps in here. This John Erickson Memorial stamp is pretty chewed up, so that's almost of no value to anyone. Moving along. Here we go. So this is, I think, the page that tells us the most about what's going on here. These Perf 11, 1917 to 1919 issues are pretty common stamps, but you can see that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 other stamps have been pulled out and taken out of this composition book. My current theory about what's going on here is that this collector was a fairly sophisticated collector, a fairly skilled collector. You note that they have noted the perforations of these as a difference. They're not just taking images of stamps. I see later on in the album that there are some places where they've noted the watermark. So this is a fairly sophisticated collector. And what I think is happening here is that this collector has come through and added stamps to this until they got enough stamps to justify buying a US album. And that as soon as they got an album, they started taking stamps out of this and putting it into their album. but that these two stamps are so common that they didn't need to take these out to put in the album. They already had other copies of this hanging around that they could use. Again, if they were trying to cherry pick the expensive stamps out of that, this 2 cent, what I have to assume would be the 2 cent 1 blank 3, would have been a stamp that would have stayed here as well, because there's no reason to pick that out for value. So that's my working theory, is that this collector worked forward. Every time they got a new series, they added it to this album. And then when they finally justified buying an album for themselves, they took out of this composition book and added it to the album. So nice 75-cent parcel post. That's a nice stamp to look up. We'll look that up in a minute. Here's a nice postage due stamp from an old series. Notice the 1 cent version, 1889. We'll move on to 1917 postage dues, and then here's a new series that is added to the collection. Again, not terribly expensive stamps, but nice examples of them. So we'll keep looking here forward. Really nice stamps. And then, hold on, a little bit of jumping back into the 1890 series. So I'm imagining that as they found new stamps and they didn't have spaces for them, they created a new title, added the stamps, and as soon as they filled up their album, as soon as they justified an album, they moved stamps over into it. That's my best guess. One of the things I really enjoy about getting an old album is getting my head around what the collector's psyche was. They spent a lot of time caring for and loving kind of their collection. And so I like to do the same thing when I get a collection like this, and not just kind of randomly dismiss with it or pull out all the stamps or throw them away, or, I'm not going to throw away the stamps, but kind of dismiss the work they did. I do think that this stamp album has been picked through enough that it probably makes sense for me to pull out some of the others if they fit my collection, because there's plenty of places where that's been done already. But I'm going to kind of look at and catalog what's in this collection to kind of make sure that what I pull out of here doesn't kind of change the tenor of what this album is about, and kind of maintain as much of the kind of the love that's in this book that I can. So moving along, we have a few more issues just kind of bumping around in time. Look here, a really nice old postage due from 1879. That's a nice one. And then we look and jump over to this 1882 Jefferson 10 cent. That's a really nice stamp. And so I'm kind of curious if that fits in my collection someplace. So really nice, very common stamp from the series of 1873. More Washington Franklins, completely out of order in this book. Now we jump over to the Rotary Press, 11.5 by 10.5 from 1927. So you see a lot of jumping about in this page. But now we get to the end, and so we have a blank, untitled page in this book. This book stays untitled for 20, 30 pages until it finally gets to the end, revenue stamps. These are very nicely ordered in this book. You can see that whoever put them in here lined them up very nicely, but you can also see that none of them are picked. Revenue stamps, if somebody were picking for higher value stamps, revenue stamps would be a place where you might pick out those high value ones. So my guess is that when this collector moved into a new album, they didn't have a section for these revenue stamps in that new album, and so they just kept them in this composition book. And you'll see that there's 3 total pages of these revenue stamps. Really nice, clean examples of these revenue stamps. I'm not sure I've seen so many stamps of revenue types that are so well maintained. And indeed, at the very end, here's a $1 State of New York stock transfer stamp, another kind of fun find. And that is the end of this composition book. So let me go away. I will catalog what's here, figure out what we actually have, and come back and tell you what my decision is about how I'm going to not make best use of the stamps that are in this album. Okay, I'm back. I've gone through all the stamps in this composition book. I have noted that most of them in here are pretty common stamps, but a few stood out. So let's take a look particularly at this first one. This is Scott number 26. This is a really nice example of Scott number 26, and I have Scott number 26 already. But look at this one in particular. I am convinced that this one is unused. It has a little bit of a smudge in the top right corner, but when I flip it over, I look and I see that the gum is completely intact. So I am convinced that this is new, unused, and so I've rescued it into my collection. The other thing worth noting here is these two copies of Scott number 65. These are common as well, and I do already have a copy of this, but I spent a fair amount of time going through various websites trying to convince myself that these weren't the more uncommon pink variety. The one on the, it's hard to tell on a video like this to see shades, but the one on the left here actually is a fairly pinkish light hue. So I took out these two stamps and I put them in my collection as a reference for the various shades because I have convinced myself that they are not the rarer pink variety. Anyway, I pulled out a total of 16 stamps out of this composition book, including these. The first three I already showed you, but there were also these two early postage due stamps that I was missing. The 2 cents is the brown shade of Scott number J2, the second postage due stamp that the U.S. ever produced. The 1 cent is from a later red-brown color. This one's a little more common, but it's still a nice find. I decided it was best to pull out these stamps from the composition book and give them a new home. This composition book is not on acid-free paper, and you can see that the pages are yellowing, and it would really be a shame to have the valuable ones damaged by that acid paper. I didn't pull out all the stamps, though. I left in most of the others in an effort to keep the historic interest of the book. I may change my mind a little bit later, but for now, the others will stay in the book. In fact, I added back another 38 stamps in places where the others had already been picked out. I thought it would be nice to see the book closer to the way it might have looked back in the day. The next stamp is this 75-cent parcel post stamp. 75 cents is a high value in this series. It's really worth saving from these acidic pages, and otherwise it was missing from my collection, so a nice pull. The last stamp on this page is a minor shade variant of the blue special delivery stamp, Scott number E11C. There were 2 of them in the book, and I took one out from my collection. I'm really of 2 minds with this book. On the one hand, it's got these acidic pages that over time are going to do damage to the stamps. And on the other hand, it's got this historic value of somebody spending a lot of time making an artifact of their life and their collection. So I'm of 2 minds about whether I keep the stamps in here or pull them out. There's still a few valuable stamps left in this book that probably would be best to take out and save. I really don't know what I'm going to do with it yet. If you have some thoughts, I'd love to hear what your thoughts are in the comment. Help me figure out whether I keep this album together or this book together to retain the history that's in it, or whether I take the stamps out and make sure they get the best care possible. I also pulled these stamps out of those 3 pages of revenue stamps. I already had copies of the others. That's it for today. Thanks, Mom, for sending along this composition book of stamps. I love it. Also, I want to note that as I've looked back over some earlier cuts of this video, that I haven't quite figured out how to use the mic correctly. You might see right here that I've put it a little closer to my face. I noticed that when I turned my head as I was demoing some of the stamps or showing some of the stamps, that it dimmed out in places. I'll try and fix that in post-production. Maybe it won't matter. But I'm still learning how to use the equipment. Still, the sound quality from this mic is so much better than it was using the mic on my iPhone, so I'm really happy with that. I'm also happy with the lighting characteristics of this new lighting. So thank you to my wife. I think we all owe her a debt for her support of this channel and making it a little bit nicer to watch. Anyway, enjoy your holidays, the rest of them, and have a happy new year.